The problem, the reason why I've started contemplating political processes in Australia is the complete breakdown of fundamental governance in Australia in 2020. Uh, but what really broke, so I was expecting to continue for another at least 4 or 5 years in my job. And what finally made me leave was the requirement that I cannot raise my voice on social media about the police state that we become here with Dan Andrews. All that stuff about the police beating up people. I'm sure you've seen the images. People go out on the street and they get beaten up by the police. One of them was hospitalized. They had to go to the ICU and they had to have induced coma because these guys went completely berserk in the name of public health. And being an economist, my initial reaction from February onwards, I've been raising it internally. I've actually FOI'd my emails and published them now. Was that this is completely wrong. This is not the way we do a pandemic. Okay, we do not shut down borders. We do not shut down businesses on a large scale. We focus on those who are at high risk and protect them, which we did not. We were supposed to protect the elderly, which we did not. We actually started putting energy in the young, and that's why there were 800 deaths in Victoria. You're probably familiar with that. In the aged care homes and others, 800 people died because the government was focusing on other things. So we had a lot of other issues involved. So I had to finally, call this a police state. And then I was asked to remove my comments. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm resigning. And initially, I raised matters in the Fin Review or Financial Review. And then I put some article in the Australian on the 30th of December explaining why this is not even a serious pandemic. Forget about the Spanish flu. It's not even a Hong Kong flu. I gave all the evidence and so on. And so the reason I thought that these guys will listen. Okay, I thought that there's some sense in them and that they might listen based on all this evidence. And I wrote that book, Great Hysteria and the Broken State, which provides all this information in more details. That didn't happen. Liberal Party people in Victoria contacted me, and I've been in touch with many of them. And I basically said, look, I'm happy to join you guys and support you because I want to get Dan Andrews out. That's a very clear thing now. I just cannot have this man operating as a premier of the state. But then the Liberal Party did not respond to my requests for changing policy. And it all starts with Scott Morrison's closure of borders. We are locked up in Australia like a chicken coop. We started in a coop of, we can't get out and get in without permission, and they don't give permission easily. And so basically you're locked. And there are a lot of Australians who are outside Australia who can't get in. So this is absolutely unbelievable. We're like North Korea. We're like a communist society and central planning. And on top of that, they want people to have a QR code and sign in whenever they go to a restaurant and so on. So I've stopped going to restaurants. Okay, we basically are operating in what is a pre-communist society. People who've come from these communist countries to Australia, they've been writing to me and talking to me on the phone and others and telling me this is exactly how it was there, that you would needed a permission to do everything. And that permissioning is where the authority, it becomes clear that you are actually owned by the government. Like you were talking about, the people haven't got that sense of, their own sovereignty, essentially, that they are willing to allow the government to do these things. So we've actually been trampled upon by the government at a very fundamental level. And then they force people, I don't know whether you were in Western Australia, but we were actually asked to wear masks publicly outside. When you're going fishing, there's nobody around. When you walk, there's nobody around. You're supposed to wear a mask. What the hell is this whole thing about? And, we were asked, I was asking this chief health officer on Twitter, and he blocked me. The answer of these guys is that they will block you if you ask questions. They will not answer, and they will block you. And so this was getting quite bad. And so I think what I've finally come to the view is that if the Liberal Party aren't going to fix it in Victoria, because they actually, they need to fix they need to open up the borders, and they're not going to do that. By the way, they're also talking about mandatory vaccines now, making it as mandatory as possible. Vaccines, passports, all sorts of ways to force you to get a vaccine when it's actually not even a serious disease for the vast majority of the people. They don't need it, and they can actually choose. If they want, by all means, take it. I have no issues with that. I'm not anti-vaccine.
Yeah, and that's one of it. That's our policies. It's got to be consensual. If you want the vaccine, sure. I mean, I'm pro-vaccine, but I'm not going to take a vaccine. Yeah. Anyway, you know all that. Yep. Keep going. Yep.
Absolutely. Therefore, the whole thing here of a liberal democracy that we were supposed to be, and if you mentioned the UK origins of Australia, modern Australia, and UK has the origins in the Magna Carta, and prior to Magna Carta, there were so many fights and battles and writings and scholastics and so on and so forth. It's a massive literature, which I've written a book called Discovery of Freedom, and that's about 700 pages, and I've got a lot of material. And the UK, the Dutch, the Europeans, the Spanish, they were all involved in creating that awareness, which led to the Western Enlightenment. And that was the revolution where people were given independence of their religion. They could choose what religion they wanted. They could the king was no longer the boss, so the parliament became the boss, and in terms of the governance. But the parliament was also not the real boss. It was the individual who was at the center. All that stuff has been forgotten, and I think there is no one listening. And I think I can understand why the liberal politicians and the labor politicians are not interested, because they are, as you mentioned earlier, they're all in this for power, okay? And they will, if they start,
they're all usurpers. They're all usurpers. The law says the usurpers. Yeah.
Therefore, they are not interested in Australia's fundamental, the liberties of Australians, the self-respect of Australians, and those basic questions that you mentioned as well. I'm quite, interested in looking at them in due course. But the real issue for me right now is how do we get these guys to listen to us? And the one answer that I came out with, Rod, was that maybe what we do is we disturb their marginal seats, not only in the upper house, which is something we can do, but in the lower house. And how do we do the lower house? Because we're very small. All these, small parties are very, very new, like yours are new. They haven't yet built, like there's an Australia One party that's pretty new as well. Some are new, some are old. Yesterday, I spoke with Lloyd Russell, who is the president of the Liberal Democrats, and they're about 20 years old, but they haven't made a big impact so far. So really, all these little small parties, they get a senator here and there and so on. Even One Nation is probably the biggest, but that also continuously goes up and down. So what we have is a potential to form a coalition. So what I'm arguing right now is that let's all come together as a group, and let's allocate the seats for the lower house as well as the upper house. We'll have a very systematic discussion, about how it can be done. But then let's say 3 to 5 or 7 parties join together, and what we have is a coalition which is demanding back to the old normal, the normal that we saw. Even though it may had all the issues that you mentioned, there were lots of issues to deal with, and that's why you have a party. Which, but as I said, for me that was relatively less important, because we were somehow able to create a quality of life that is competitive in the rest of the world. And so, but now we're not going to be, anywhere with $400 billion burnt down, in this COVID crisis. We've just destroyed our wealth in Australia, shut down businesses left, right, and center. We're going to take decades to recover. We're entering a pretty dire situation in Australia. So we have to do something about this, and these parties aren't doing anything. So let's then disturb their plans. So that means if, for example, if it's a Liberal candidate who is actually the incumbent in a particular seat in the lower house, and it's a marginal seat with 2 to 5% margin, what we can do is we can put up one candidate, campaign for that particular candidate as a group, and that particular second preference of that candidate would then go to the opposing party. So let's say the Liberal is a Liberal that's an incumbent, it'll go to the Labor incumbent, go to the Liberal. So these guys' plans get disrupted. They cannot anticipate who's going to be the next prime minister. This is actually for the next forthcoming Commonwealth election. This is one of my plans, to disturb them so that they cannot plan. And if they cannot plan, they cannot commit anything. And so they're forced to come and listen. And they're forced to adopt these policies that we're talking about that get back to some sense. Now, there's probably about 2% of the policies on which all parties can agree. And these are all the similar ones about, no compulsion in vaccines, make sure you follow the laws, don't close the borders. That's a breach of international law, and so many other things. Don't have the interstate closures. That's a breach of the Constitution, Section 92, and so on and so forth. So what we're saying is, get back to the old normal. Let people take their own precautions themselves. And you look after the elderly, you look after the vulnerable. The hospital system has not been even slightly stretched during this 2020-2021 pandemic. We've just made such a big drama out of the whole thing. So what we want to do is the 98% of things that people have in mind, like all the stuff that you mentioned. Liberal Democrats, they've got lots of stuff on a range of policies. I spoke to Lloyd Russell yesterday. I'm sure there'll be a few. There's another called Informed Medical Options Party, and I'm talking to them today as well. There's another party as well I'm talking today to. What I'm trying to say is that let's have 2% agreement on everything. And for the 98%, you go for it. So you get 20 seats or allocated or whatever, the 10, 20 seats. For those seats, you can put on the full blast 100% of your agenda, okay? But that 2% is the spearhead, by which we all agree we're going to get these people disturbed. We're going to disturb their plans. And in the upper house, we're going to get as many seats as possible. This coalition should manage to get as many seats as possible. Of course, in the upper house, everybody's independent. They have their own views. They can, vote the way they want. This is not like a single party. It's basically a coalition. And it's not been attempted before. I spoke to somebody from Adelaide yesterday. He was the founder of the Family First Party. And he said, this has not been attempted before, what I'm suggesting. I said, yeah, it's not been attempted before because there was never such desperate urgency where we've gone down a totalitarian path in which now we are no longer even free to move outside our house. 5 kilometers was the range which they put in Victoria for months after months. You could not get out for 23 hours a day. The curfew was imposed. At night, you could not even get out for 1 minute, and so on and so forth. The kind of restrictions we've had, and on top of that, you get out, you have a mask, even if you're going out you walk outside in the park. It was such a disaster, this place. And it can become a disaster any moment here. I think in Western Australia, there was a somewhat similar, but not as bad a curfew in the last few weeks, which was then lifted. But I think Melbourne had the worst of all. What we need is to stop this from happening now and need to stop it from happening in the future. So what we're saying is that there can be independence. People can choose the party. When they want to contest, let's say we have about all the seats contested, we have a set of leaders agreed, then they can choose whichever party they want. Like there's Monica is there, I'm there. I mean, there's so many people who can choose a party, or they can even contest as an independent. I'm definitely going to contest elections in my constituency, both the Commonwealth and the state. I will fight no matter if I lose, doesn't matter. I'm going to fight till the very end, okay? Rod, I'm not giving up. This is not the kind of Australia I've come for. I will not tolerate this. I will not let us become a China or a totalitarian society. So we have to fight back just to get back to the old normal. Forget about, the improvements to the old normal. With now in a new normal that is so deadly and so totalitarian, we cannot afford to continue this. So that's the broad model. And as I said, I want to send you some preliminary document. Have a think about it. You remain completely free to advocate your party, to get, like people like Monica, like me, we can all join any party. We can join you, we can join an XYZ any party, or we can just contest as independents. But the idea is that we will contest as a group, as a team, and we will talk as a team across Australia. We will have this 15 or 20 people who are leaders. And these leaders are going to tell Australia that we do not want this new normal. We want the old normal once again.